Oh, and just one other little thing I think we mentioned while we were both here together was the Milton Torres case, which I know is not a little thing at all, but one thing you made me aware of in your talk last night is that was actually first reported in 1991, I think it was, wasn't it, in the Daily Star? They did a feature on Milton Torres, because the first time I'd heard about that case was, I think, in around about 2008, 2009, when he was, I think you'd done a couple of lectures, hadn't you? He'd done a couple of radio interviews about his case, and this was an extraordinary case where he was flying over Suffolk, was it? Or
no, yes, from across Ipswich, off the coast of Ipswich and Suffolk, onto the North Sea, when he was ordered to fire his rockets at this thing. And his Super Sabre F-86D scrambled from Manson with his wingman, because they were on QRA standby. And within seconds of... He had this coded order given him, which shook him up. And he challenged it, couldn't believe what he was being told. And he said, it must have come from the Royal Air Force, because we weren't allowed to fire any weapons in your airspace, or even on the ground. The Rendlesham Forest case, Colonel Holt and his team who went into the forest more than once, they had to leave all their hand weapons and their rifles in the truck inside the base. They couldn't take them out into the forest, in our territory without permission from the UK government. So
so Torres was 1957, wasn't it?
57, yes. He was 26 years old then.
Years old. And then so he told this to the Star newspaper in 91.
That surprises me, because he was told so forcibly by
his superiors.
No, he calls them the spook. American spook came from London. And he's pretty sure that he was an NSA official, and he briefed both pilots separately and warned them this was highly classified, and he was not even to talk to his squadron commander about it. So why he ended up giving an interview to the Daily Star in 1991, he came over to the UK several years on the trot, might have been perhaps 2 or 3 years in between, because at Manston, where they were based, they had squadron reunions, and they had perhaps another F-86 still sat around, I don't know. So I think it was one of his reunion visits when he decided to do an interview. Why the Daily Star, how he got hold of the Daily Star, I don't know. But again, at one of his reunions, there was an ex-RAF sergeant who was heavily into historical aircraft, particularly the Super Sabre. He has a website called Duncan Sabres. Anyway, it's Duncan Curtis's name. And he actually told him, because he was obviously questioning an ex-pilot about his aircraft to get information for his website, I suppose. And Milton decided, I suppose, to perhaps ill-advisedly defying his order of secrecy, to mention it to him. I think that was all. And then how I came to know of it was through Harry Harris, a solicitor friend in Manchester, who was a very active ufologist at the time. And Harry was in London on a course to refresh certain solicitor rules on conveyancing, which was what his particular speciality was. And he left his hotel where he was to go to a steakhouse for a meal, and he was queuing. It was one of these self-service things, like Carvery, I suppose. And he was behind 2 American ladies, and he said, making conversation, having a tourist site around London, and he said, well, we are, but our husbands are here because they're ex-pilots, and we've been to Manston for a squadron reunion, you see. So Harry says, so he's a pilot. Has he ever seen a UFO? Which is what you should always ask pilots. And his wife said to him, not only has he seen one, he was ordered to shoot one down. Because Harry was very excited about that. He dropped his tray. And anyway, he sat down, he was in the toilet at the time, and had a meal with him. And they became quite good friends. And on a subsequent reunion, they came up and stayed with Harry and Sue Harris in Manchester, en route to go to the Lake District in Scotland, to see the sights. and his wingman pilot, Dave Roberson, also joined them. And this date, which was 20th of May 1957. And they both agreed with the narrative that they were given the same coded order to fire off their 24 Mighty Bounce missiles at this craft. Yeah. And then the thing was shot off, knowing, I think, that the weapons were locked onto them, which happens a lot.
Yes, apparently.
And he was flat out at almost Mach 1, 9.92.
9.2, wasn't it? Yeah.
He could fly, and this thing pulled away from him off his scope. It was locked on to fire, and Milton reckoned it was doing Mach 10 at least.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the ground radar at Bordsea in Suffolk Coast, which was his GCI centre, said the object went off their radar scope in 2 turns of the schooner. So report back to base, go back to they call it home plate, go back to Banstead, and you will be debriefed. And this chap came up from London the following day and read the riot act to them and recorded what they had to say. So anyway, 1995, it might have been 4, when I sat in Harry's office in Sale, and Milton was on the phone, and he recorded Milton's phone conversation, his experience, and he backed it up with a paper print off of his experience. So I got permission from Harry to delve deeper into the case, try and find out who gave the orders for him to fire, which was a big burning question. Excuse me. And I had some telephone conversations with Milton and some emails. He wasn't very good at emailing. But anyway, he sent me some very nice pictures, which I used in the talk. And I also spoke to Dave Roberson, his wingman, and tracked down from where the route from the order would come.
Okay.
Going back to Fighter Command at Bentley Priory at Stanmore, which was the old RAF Fighter Command headquarters, and they had a bunker there. So I reckon that for such a serious thing, it would have been a much senior rank to give the orders to fire, and I suspect it would be a group captain as a minimum, possibly an air commodore or even a vice air marshal, to give the licence to expend all the ordnance on one hand, and also the risks of Cold War time. Yeah. So if there was an incident, it could become very politically embarrassing. So there's all these risks that somebody would have to weigh up before giving the order to fire, and it could have ended up as the loss of the aircraft and the deaths of the 2 pilots. As has happened in the Americans, there's a lot of pilots being killed attacking UFOs. Yeah. Until President at the time, Eisenhower, I think. Roosevelt. Anyway, I think rescinded this order not to fire, to try and get them to land. Yeah. Which was a bit ridiculous.
And then later you said that the wingman, what was his name again, David?
David Roberson.
Roberson. Because he was quite obviously quite elderly, both quite elderly. Yeah. Milton Torres passed on now, hasn't he? I think he passed on a couple of years ago, didn't he?
I don't know.
I believe he did. Yeah, I
believe
he passed on.
Oh, right.
But the Dave Roberson, you'd heard more recently that he'd gone into a retirement home, hadn't he, or a residential care home?
Yes.
So tell us about what happened with that.
Yeah. Well, he sort of denied on that date he'd flown a mission with Milton and ever given an order to attack a UFO. So he completely changed his story for when they were sat together at Harris's home in Sale some years previously. Yeah. And I think maybe he was worried, or he'd been warned, possibly, because of the publicity now of the case, because he was in a home funded by Uncle Sam, and on a pension from Uncle Sam, and maybe he felt at risk, or they threatened him about that, so he went into sort of denial, which is a shame. In fact, I think he wrote a letter to Harry, which ended up with all Harry's letters to the MOD, to Air Staff 2A, with Dick Pope was there. I think it was Dick Pope's time, it might have been a bit later. And when they released these documents in the 1980s, the only reason it was in the 1980s, like in the incident took place in the 1950s, of Harris's correspondence badgering the MOD, and I've got copies of those, quite humorous, some of the side comments from people. It's that Harris again, you know, sort of niggling and chiseling away at trying to get information. They passed him to an American records place in the States because they thought, oh, it's an American unit, we haven't got the records of their operations at Manston, etc. So it was passing the buck very neatly. So Harry, beautifully being Harry, writes off, and he gets a reply back from some USAF major, I think, denying all knowledge. And I filed a Freedom of Information Act request on the MOD, which didn't go very far. I did get a very nice response from a chap, actually, the Air Historical Branch 2, as it was called, it's perhaps still called that, which was also based at Bentley Priory, Shamrock at that time. I don't think it is now. And he told me that all the records for 1950s had long been destroyed. So that, and even if they hadn't been, there was no way they were going to tell me the name of the officer who'd given Milton Torres the orders to fire, I suppose. It'd be very naive of me to think that they would do that. But it was worth a go.
Yeah, yeah. Because then you had this document, which was this report about the shoot down of the UFO, but all the names were blanked out. Whether that come through Harry, had he got it through a Freedom of Information request or declassified document?
No, he must have sent that letter to the MOD with his letters of request.
Yeah.
Here's a pilot letter, which was turned out to be Dave Roberson. Well, all the names was blacked out. So when I look at the documents, everyone assumes
that it was Milton's.
It was Milton Torres who had written that,
but it wasn't.
And it wasn't. It was
Dave Roberson. Yeah, yeah.
And he was defending or protecting his position, denying that on the 20th of May he hadn't flown as wingman to Milton on this mission to shoot down the UFO.
And the other extraordinary thing that you told us about this case was this: when you made the inquiries, that one of the people that you spoke to referred to this book. They said we didn't have a document, so tell us about what they referred you to and the author of that book, who we know well, don't we, unfortunately?
Yes, well, there was a certain gentleman who was a Yorkshire, Hallam University chappie from the past, called Dr. David Clark, and he got himself in a position, or was put in a position, to manage all the UFO releases from the MOD at the Public Records Office in Kew, PRO, and write informative information adding to the mere document reference as a sort of guidance. In fact, he wrote quite a long spiel, which is on the internet, of how to guide people through all these releases which they did by decade to decade. Now, when I got a reply from this gentleman at the Air Historical Branch, the best he could offer me under the Freedom of Information Act request was that there was a brief reference in a book by David Clark and Andy Roberts, and he even said it's page 406.
Now, a page reference.
Yeah, I thought that's a bit rich. This has come from a so-called ufologist, but debunker.
Yes.
No doubt about it, Clark isn't. So Clark knew about that case all that time ago, and the book was published in 2002, which was 5 years before I was doing all this investigation. He got the information from this RAF sergeant called Duncan Curtis off his website.
Yes.
So Andy Roberts or Dr. Clark had lifted it out of Curtis's book. It's this historical book about the use of operations of Sabre F-86Ds, and that was just something he threw in the book. So they lifted a bit of that and put a chapter in mentioning the Torres case. So I thought that was a bit ironic in a way,
Yeah, yeah.
So,
It's. I mean, it's amazing. You know, this is how the information's managed, and I've come across David Clark. I'll mention my experience, the brief experience with David Clark. I was invited to speak on Radio Derby. I think they had World UFO Day or something one year. This was about 7, 8, 9 years ago. You know, and I lived just outside Derby, and they got my name down as a person of, you know, who knows about these things. And then I got into the studio. It was only like a 10-minute talk or something, 5-minute talk in the breakfast show. 7 o'clock in the morning, 6:30 in the morning. And they who was on the phone line, who I didn't know, David Clark, and he's not even from Derbyshire. He's lives in Yorkshire somewhere.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, why have they got this David Clark on to speak when they've invited me as a local person to speak on the show as well? All very strange, and I think it's part of the way that this information is managed.
Yeah.
But I'd like to thank you very much, David, for spending time with me to go through those details again that you went through last night. And I'll make this into a video. We'll talk to Robert, obviously, and we'll maybe get this posted in the next week or two, just so that people get a bit more information about these very important cases that you've kept alive, so to speak, or helped to keep alive. And again, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, good.